dank where it's up to that building for some reason.
Hey, Chad, do you know what's going on up there at, the Belcher building? They're moving dirt and everything.
Drainage.
Is it for drainage?
Brian, that's drainage for the Highway 61 project, right? That they're moving by the Belter,
The big blue pole barn up there on the highway?
in between Dairy Queen, or just south of Dairy Queen.
Yeah, they're doing grading in the ditches.
We had asked them to do that because of all that, when it rains, it pours for Dairy Queen and all those other businesses. We tried to get the county to participate and they wouldn't.
Can I get a
Oh,
council
really?
packet?
That's because you don't cooperate with them and give them a waiver.
I got news on that one, my friend.
Yeah, I didn't like that way it was
Ask
written in
the
the paper.
Corps.
Yeah.
How many o'clock would that be?
That was pretty good.
Dugan.
Brian would like to meet with me, and I'm not gonna meet with him without you.
One
It's
block,
not
about one
productive
block,
time.
maybe two. I think he asked him, yeah, about
He
Up
said, he's out a month.
Yeah.
You know where Dean Plank used to live?
No, but I recall it.
You know where, Mark, Jarstead lives?
Yeah.
He's right on, he's right on
Oh,
the
yeah.
existing Dugan.
Then it's a shared county expense, it's us, it's Olmsted County. I think that's the only two with the state. These, it's internal. For the record.
Should we wait for Wendy? She's just making another copy of a packet. Just give her a second.
Another thing, is that for Dean? We missed it. Have some
Wendy's
updates.
just making a copy of a packet. I'm just gonna wait for her 1 sec. It's a short one. I think it'll be quick. If it was 145 pages, I'd start without her.
300, that one.
Yeah.
That one I was last tonight. We have some updated, it's for, they're on your, on everybody's seat. So, then, well, two that we actually got, one was all before
There's a handful of these.
we didn't have a quorum at utilities. Everybody thought today was a Monday.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sorry, Dean.
That's all right.
All right. I'd like to call to order the September 3rd, 2019 meeting of the Wabasha City Council. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have any guest speakers today? I know we have guests later on in the agenda. I don't see anybody else. Or any public comments before we start? All right. Do we have any changes or additions to the agenda?
Yeah, on the consent agenda, do I do it at the consent agenda or now?
At the consent.
At the consent agenda, okay.
All right. I'll hold there.
I'd like to add item 10.6, which is approval of the job descriptions which are in front of you for a finance director / treasurer clerk and deputy clerk positions. And then also approval to, this is all under item 10.6, would be approval to post immediately for the finance director and deputy city clerk positions with a posted until filled date on those job postings. And then item 10.7 I would like to add, which is approval to promote Wendy Bush to the position of clerk effective immediately.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any additional additions or changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, just a little update from me. Sorry, Ruby, if I'm too quiet, just wave and I'll repeat myself. Fighting a cold. So it was a beautiful Labor Day weekend. I hope everybody had a little time away from work. Really exceptional weather. And Septoberfest starts not only right on time, but I don't know if you noticed, it starts before it's even September. and I don't know how quite this group gets that accomplished living where I do. You'd think I'd see these people out all the time, but it just sort of magically appears, and I know that's not true. So we're very, very grateful to everybody who kicks that into full gear. We had a very productive, and Tim might want to speak to this, or John, we had a productive convening of the Planning Commission and the Port Authority to discuss this Greater Minnesota Futures project that we have really, it's complete in the eyes of the project staff. Their fiscal year ended July 30th. As far as our work, I think has only just begun. We were given some helpful vision documents for redevelopment of the athletic field parcel and some guidance about how elements of that parcel design could enhance livability and commercial opportunities, as well as recreational and public opportunities, including access to the Zumbro Slough. I had a productive follow-up meeting with the Corps, with some of their staff, not the Corps team that we've been working with on the draft dredge material management plan, but a different team who guided me through some tools that the Corps has available to municipalities to work on things such as habitat restoration where the Corps has had activity. So, for example, the Zumbro and enhancement of water quality there, as well as shore habitat. So that work is going to continue in, hopefully, in the spirit in which it was initiated, which is to involve other stakeholders from the community. Craig had mentioned that maybe the next possible opportunity to take that to others would be a public meeting. We'll kind of arrive at what we think is the most reasonable process, but I would certainly welcome that. If anybody from the public is curious to see the vision documents, we could probably make them available on the city webpage. It's a big PDF, but it's quite an impressive amount of work that we could share with others, and there are large printed versions of it here at City Hall. We had a really good meeting with the Corps. I'm not going to steal Chad's thunder. He'll have an update there, I'm sure, with regards to the draft dredge material management plan that was conducted at Wabasha Kellogg, and there was excellent attendance. I think there were about 80 there with good coverage from the press. And now that school is in session, just in time, we have a splash pad. But it's really exciting. I was very curious driving by St. Felix the other day on my way here to City Hall to see preschoolers lined up in bathing suits, and I thought, well, I wonder what they're doing. Well, they were walking to the splash pad. So even though school is in session, there were kids using that the whole day. I came back for an evening meeting, and there was giggling and screaming all day, and I'm just so grateful for everybody involved in the city who made that happen, as well as the significant donations that were made to the city for that to occur. Would have been great to have it early this year, but I don't think projects like that ever run on schedule. So we're just happy to have it in place. And I think that's all for me. Anybody want to start with a committee report? John, do you want to talk about Port Authority?
Sure. So the Port Authority we met jointly with the Planning Commission, and I think between you and Chad, you guys can talk about that part. But with the Port Authority, we met Tuesday the 20th. I think most folks or some folks saw in the paper that we had a bit of a questionnaire with respect to some economic development downtown, and we've had some decent response and some thoughtful responses to that, which has been really pretty nice. And I think we're going to try to take that data and work with some folks, as an example, the Extension Services, Minnesota Extension Services, to help us develop a survey so we can better take that data and use it as a tool going forward for an economic development plan for downtown. But that was a lot of the topic that evening. We also talked about the new position, and then the joint meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers that happened on the 28th, and I think Chad had something you'll speak with as well. And that was about it for the Port Authority.
I'll make one little note just so that there's clarification, because I had people concerned about this issue. Childcare has been brought up as an issue of concern in the Port Authority as it relates to economic development. Employers have spoken, certainly families have felt this for a long time, but employers have vocalized to the city that they're concerned about viable childcare options, not just for regular daytime hours, but for other shifts, as well as sick childcare. They feel it's an issue with regards to appropriately staffing their business environments. So Chad and I endeavored to sort of get on that topic, and I've been working with having communication with providers, with Head Start, with our preschool programs, And as Con Walters joined the Port Authority, he was made aware of an opportunity to pursue a grant. Again, not a grant in funds, but a grant in aid, meaning no money will flow to the city, at least at this time, to investigate this issue. Childcare shortages are an issue nationally, but they're very extreme in some parts of our region, and that's known through the work of First Children's Finance, or is it Children's First Finance? They are responsible for the data that the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, or SMIF, uses to kind of quantify the issue. Wabasha is an unusual, in terms of its metrics. It shows fewer spots needed for children than other communities that are adjacent to us. But as St. Elizabeth's pointed out, commuting patterns matter with regards to employment. So a significant portion of St. Elizabeth's employees, as well as other major employers, including the city, come from Wisconsin. And so we're seeing rural childcare shortages reflected in those areas as impacting the overall availability of childcare for our employees of Wabasha, not just our residents. So I think it's a nuanced issue. I really have appreciated the feedback I've gotten from childcare providers. If you know a childcare provider, please thank them for what they're doing. They're essentially providing infant and toddler care only at this time because that need is so great that they have shifted to become, infant childcare providers versus family childcare providers. And if you can imagine what it would be like to be at home with 8 kids of varying ages who can help out and are at different developmental stages versus 8 children under 2, you can kind of imagine what those providers are faced with. Not to mention, it gets more and more challenging for them to make their business work financially every day, and regulations for childcare are significant, as they should be. But I just think it's underestimated what childcare providers who are doing in-home license provision are dealing with. So their concerns are of utmost concern because they are the backbone of childcare provision in our community. So we'll engage a steering committee with representation from the county, the city, the larger employers, childcare providers, and public health, among others. So more to follow, but right now that's just a grant application. We hope to be awarded that. I think it'll provide a lot of resources to the community with regards to how other communities have addressed this, but there is no funding at this time. This is really going to be a period of study, I think similar to the Greater Minnesota Futures Project, a year of examining in quite a bit of detail what the issue, what your issues are and what your priorities are and what your resources are, I think is the only first step. There's just no obvious solution to childcare, or everybody would have already adopted that obvious solution. And I think every community has to kind of address it uniquely. So that's just, we'll learn more if we're funded. I should say awarded that opportunity.
Right.
Thank you. Tim, you want to talk about that joint planning meeting or anything else in
So we
planning?
met on August 13th. So some other activities before I get to that. We approved a conditional use permit for outdoor seating for a new restaurant that's forthcoming, hopefully early next year, Rick's Italian Restaurant. We also revised our Solar Garden Farm zoning ordinance more to reflect private properties and how to have a little bit more governance and kind of similar statute or similar conditions, private versus public and stuff like that. And as you did mention, we did talk about the Minnesota Greater Futures Project. Mainly we talked about the athletic field and really the potential that we could have down there other than just having a road right through there. As far as, do we have businesses, do we have housing, do we have recreational, do we have paths and stuff like that. And I think it's a good idea to get that kind of concepts out there.
Yeah.
I don't think we're at a point to really kind of make any decisions, but we really wanted to kind of discuss it amongst the port and the planning as well, just to kind of get people to start thinking about this whole, what are our potential down at the athletic field. And there's a lot of, what do we do with the ball fields? What do we do with the volleyball courts? What do we do with skateboard? So on and so forth, which some of this has already been discussed. I think we just need to kind of wrap our arms around it and get it all into one big plan type of thing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all I wanted to say on that. So just a reminder, we still do have 2 openings on that commission. So if anybody wants to join
Yes.
that. And then our next meeting, I think is going to be September 10th, but we might cancel that one.
If I may I circle back? One other thing that we did discuss at the Port Authority was Ralph Thompson's resignation. Ralph, as you may know, is going to be retiring, so he'll be leaving the Eagle Center as well. But he was an active member on the Port Authority, and so he's kind of pulling back on all that stuff. So there's an opening as well on the Port Authority.
Thank you for reminding me of that. I might be in denial. a little bit. And you said utilities did not meet for lack of quorum. And who else am I missing here?
Parks and streets, but they have not met recently.
Okay,
And Tony had some
Got a Parks
child
and Street.
events to get to tonight.
Parks and Streets update next month,
Yes.
and probably a little bit more detail on the splash pad. Okay, anything from you, Chad?
Like we said in the meeting on the 28th with the Corps, and something we've done the last several months has been an update on the Corps process, dealing with the dredge material management plan in the Army Corps as a whole. Just briefly highlight, if you go back to October 18th of 2018 is when the Wabasha Port Authority submitted their proposal to the Corps. Through some give and take throughout the last year, we have finally ended up with the Corps accepting our proposal, and we're moving forward with that as we speak. One thing I noted on the meeting held at the high school on the 28th is we're on about step 2 of 350. So we're very, very early yet. Even though we have an idea of what the future is going to look like, there is a lot of work to get that realized. And just to summarize, the proposal to the Corps was the use of a barge terminal on the west side of Wabasha, with the ability to get trucks and other vehicles out of town on the new County 59 right to 61. So that was the work that has happened on that to date. We have another conference call this Thursday. I'll send you that information. Do you have that information, Craig, already, or no?
No, I don't.
Okay, I will send that to you. But we have, every 2 weeks, we have touch points with the Corps to go through. You know, we bounce questions back and forth and then take the time to answer those and move forward. I do apologize for what was probably relatively quick notice on that meeting. We did get it out in the paper that was delivered to the homes 2 days in advance. And we did post the information on our website and on Facebook. But that was due to the availability of the colonel, the new colonel in town. So he was able to attend that meeting, and I thought brought important information and
Gravitas.
thoughts. And, you know, Colonel Calkins was certainly understanding of our situation and working with us. But Colonel Jansen, I think, might have taken that to a new level with some of his comments about, you know, getting back to the root cause of the issue, which is one thing was pointed out at that meeting. However, we know that there's no short-term solution to the Chippewa, and we have to deal with sand, period. It is what it is. But the colonel, I thought, brought a refreshing attitude of getting back into, you know, what can be done, so.
I counted about 50 people there, so. it
Yeah,
did
there
have
was 77.
By the end of the
a
evening.
sign-up list.
Yep. 77, and I think the number of 22 staffers is included in that, which includes all of the city staff as well as the Corps staff.
So about 50
So,
citizens.
Yep, about 50 citizens. So, I know that the colonel reached out to the landowners that were affected. He reached out the day before to the Drysdales, the Fitzgeralds, the representative from River Drive, as well as the Weisenbecks. We did have some conversation, and we'll continue to have conversation with the county on their participation in this endeavor as we go forward, because this isn't over. This is far from over, and the city, I would have to, without including city time, I would estimate close to $150,000 of expenses to date through legal fees, engineering fees, other experts that we've called in and have provided great value to the city. And none of this money has been foolishly spent, in my opinion. We have gotten a lot of good information, and obviously with the outcome that the city has requested would show that that money was money well spent at this point. So any questions on the core stuff? Like I said, we'll continue to make
Just to
this
say
my
that-
first update.
We've been waiting for the draft DMMP forever.
Yes.
And it was supposed to come out in October was the latest thing, and then at the meeting, they announced that it's gonna be in spring of 2020, so that was a disappointment.
Yeah, and I think, getting back to, thinking back on when they gave us that October, I think I might have heard the October date, but didn't realize that was agency review.
That's their deadline.
In October, that was their internal
Okay.
one, so, we might have prematurely got people excited about that. But spring is when it's due to come out. We have requested to get it during that agency review period, but that needs to go up the chain and get assessed. But if we're working in the bounds of the MOU that we put forward, there should not be anything in that draft material management plan that we haven't discussed with them. So, keep looking forward to that. Kind of a sidebar, something that's been worked on with our core team, well, subgroup, can't say core team, but our subgroup of local, Craig is a part of it, Brian Malm, John's dabbled in it as the Port Authority Chair, David Woodley has been a part of it. But we've asked the Planning Commission to take a look at the mining ordinance and work through some different dynamics of that as we go forward, and we actually have the outcome of that we're gonna review here on Thursday.
Right.
Here at City Hall, so, thanks to you both, and Wendy and Christie for, working on that. That, got turned around quite rapidly, so we appreciate that. Other things we've been working on, we've had some turnover issues we're dealing with. Sue has been out, on a leave, so we've been covering for her. She's back part-time at this point, a couple days a week, half days, I think for one more, I don't remember right offhand, I think it's one more week, and then she comes, it'll gradually increase. So we're grateful to have her back. Otherwise, wrapping up end of the summer stuff, street project. I'm told that next week we will be having asphalt put on our streets, blacktop. So, I know that question's been out there. I've received a lot of questions on that, and Brian informed me that as of 4 o'clock today, they're shooting for next week. So hopefully they stick to that schedule. The weather looks great. I can't imagine a slip there. So, but otherwise, I haven't been brought in on any big issues. I think it's been a pretty straightforward project. We haven't had many issues outside of the fact that the state and the county and everyone else is working on stuff too around here that does make it a headache. So, but we're nearing the end of construction season. So,
Amazingly.
other than that, we'll move on.
Yeah, to your point, Craig, the internal review after their own internal October 30th deadline, they've stated a few times, the core staff has stated that's like a minimum of 6 months for their agency review. And that, I'm just kind of learning to really listen when they talk about their own agency requirements, to really pick up on what they still have ahead of them.
So
As a
then
core
that's the
team.
draft, and then we'll have a comment period before
Right.
it's
Right,
formally adopted.
yes, yep. So for anybody who's concerned about any of this happening overnight, you can just rest easy. It's the federal government, so they will
And when it becomes
methodically move through.
our process, there will be ample opportunity for comments through different public hearings and other normal procedural requirements for this. And there were several questions the other night on hours of operation, and we're not there yet.
But I saw the colonel taking very explicit notes with regards to public comment, and I expect that they will be keenly attentive to the public comment period locally.
So,
All right, thank you. So we have a consent agenda. I think, Craig, you had a question about one of those items?
Yeah, I have a correction to the minutes, and I have a suggestion or correction to the Wabasha County Maintenance Agreement. So I'd like to have 8.1 and 8.4 pulled and put down in general business.
8.1, 8.4.
item 10.8 and item 10.9.
Nope, I'm out of room. I can't move those. All right, so we would have then still part of, set those aside so we don't forget. We would have, still in the consent agenda, the warrants, the public hearing for the Fitzgerald plat, and the resolution for assessment of unpaid charges for services. And we would remove the two items that Craig mentioned for general business.
Yeah, can I pull out 10.32 or 8.32?
8.3.
Sorry, I didn't see that was in there.
Okay, so, yes, 10.8, we'll make that 10.10, public hearing. It's down to very little here, folks, the warrants and resolution for assessment of unpaid charges for services. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve.
We have a motion by Councilmember Wallach and a second by Councilmember Friedmeier. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, so we don't have a public hearing this evening. We do have under general business, the first item of business, 2019 street project pay estimate number 1. I bet Brian will share some detail on that. Welcome.
Thank you. As Chad mentioned, we found out this afternoon that they're targeting next week to do the paving on the mill and overlay streets. Work that's been completed to date, they've finished all the milling, they've done the reclaimed streets, they've done the concrete curb repair. If you've driven around, you've seen that. Also this week, we understand at the end of the week, they'll be starting some utility work between the bank and Dollar General. There's a sewer line in there that is replaced as a part of the project, so they'll be digging into the state highway there to set a new manhole and then run sewer in between, basically in between the Dollar General, the bank, behind the ambulance garage, and that'll extend out into Allegheny Avenue, and then up to Hiawatha, and then they'll be running sewer along the south side of Hiawatha in front of Dick's Fresh Market, and that's for the purpose of getting sewer access to Mosquito Field, so that if you did decide to develop that at some point in the future, it would have sewer access. Water main will be extended along the north side of Hiawatha from Allegheny, again west, to basically line up with the center of Mosquito Field. And there'll be a short closure of Hiawatha when they have to construct the service across the road to serve Mosquito Field from the water main. So that work's going to start, we understand, Thursday or Friday this week, and it'll probably be a week or so of work pending weather. So the pay estimate for the job, this is for work completed through the middle of August. Total amount of work completed is $189,000 of the $1.3 million contract, so they haven't done a significant dollar amount of the work yet as of August 15th. The amount due to the contractor on the pay estimate would be $180,131.79. And we'd ask for your approval of that pay estimate to the contractor.
Very good. Do we have a motion to approve the 2019 street project pay estimate, which, as Brian just said, is $180,131.79. The contractor is Rochester Sand and Gravel.
So moved.
Councilmember Moyer, second, Sala, and discussion.
So what's the completion date?
October 31st, I believe. Yeah. Might be a 15th of substantial completion with 31st as the final. I'd have to look at the contract, but it's October.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
All right, now this next item, Chad will have some context for us, and then I have some too, to the degree that it's helpful. We have, let's look at all these financials here.
Yeah, we have some additional or slightly revised
Documentation.
documents that are on your desk for this item. They were just cleaned up a little bit.
So we have before us the prospective donation of building and property located at 137 Pembroke. Do you want me to give a little context?
However you want to do
Okay,
it.
so the property at 137 Pembroke is the small one-story, early 19th century building that is adjacent to Passy Electric and also adjacent to the alley. which is adjacent to the American Legion, former American Legion building. I'm sure you all know it. It's been in a serious state of disrepair the entire time I've been in Wabasha. When I first moved here and joined the Heritage Preservation Commission, the planner, Molly Patterson-Lundgren, was in the process of pursuing or thinking about pursuing a grant which was available to us through the State Historic Preservation Office to establish whether that building could be rehabilitated. It was already in a state of disrepair that was concerning to the public. It was in private ownership, but the city had the ability to at least have that study conducted with the building owner's permission. And so that study led to an assessment by a qualified historic architect and a structural engineer that the building in 2013 was capable, possibly able to be rehabilitated. At the time, with the building in private ownership, the HPC really didn't have any authority to do anything with that information. I think it was very good information. The report is available to the public for anyone who'd like to see it. It determined, and again, this is 2013 dollars, and significant additional erosion of the state of that building has occurred since. It estimated about $125,000 to $150,000 cost estimate to rehabilitate that speculatively as a small building that would house public restrooms that would be ADA accessible, so very nice restrooms with a ramp. And then a front area that could be used for a variety of purposes. It was specified to be flexible. It was specified with a small kitchenette and essentially open space. It was prospective at that time that the River Junctions Arts Council might be a potential partner as a nonprofit. They had aspirations of a street-level gallery. They had a below-ground gallery at that time, but would like to have seen something more accessible. There was the thought that at some point the chamber's relocation would make that an ideal location for a chamber entity, and other concepts were floated just so that you could determine feasibility for a particular use. Of course, it could be a number of other things. It's a small structure, but we needed to have something specific, especially with regards to ADA accessible bathrooms, to get an appropriate cost estimate, those bathrooms being probably the most significant cost in the building. So that report was determined, it's feasible. March forward, 6 years, the building has changed hands. Chad can speak to that if he wishes. We now have an owner who is interested in donating the building. Had we had that 7 years ago, we probably could have pursued the actual funds to rehabilitate that building. Those costs are qualifying costs for state historic preservation grants. We are now in a period of a lot more structural issues that building has suffered through a series of winters, including last winter's very difficult snowfall, as well as no time anymore to run out the grant cycle paradigm. I vetted this very thoroughly with the State Historic Preservation Office. I vetted it with the Preservation Alliance in Minnesota as a resource. I vetted it with Winona's mayor. They have a lot of preservation efforts in their downtown, which they're making a priority. And ultimately what we have is a building that is, a threat to safety and welfare. I think we can all agree. And whilst it has some historic attributes architecturally, the structure itself can't hold those attributes up anymore. So that's kind of the backstory about how the city got involved in kind of thinking about the use of this building. And the HPC has been very attentive to it the entire 7 years I've been around, and I'm probably before that, for a couple of reasons. It is almost certainly the oldest oldest commercial building in the district, so it has that. It is small enough that one could envision that project as being one that a series of grants might actually achieve. But most of all, it's just really centrally located and critical to the experience of walking up and down Main Street, which is why it's probably been brought to your attention as members of council that it's in trouble. So we have this opportunity now to talk about this donation property, which had it come sooner would have been really opportune, but now's the moment for us to talk about it. Chad, is there any nuts and bolts elements of this that you want to address?
I would simply state that, per our ordinances, one of the ordinances is slum and blight, and what has kind of precipitated this has been enforcing that ordinance with this property, which is kind of what's led to where we are today. In addition, we have proactively taken this property to HPC for demolition, to remove that slum and blight once the city takes control of this property.
As you know, HPC has the authority to review any changes to structures in the commercial district. Certainly demolition is a change, and a very historic one. It would be the first demolition approved since the HPC was established. So it's a nationally registered district, and so this is a contributing building to that district.
So, I think that's all I have on that.
Okay. So because the HPC has had its, attention focused on this building, but really no ability to do anything about it aside from study it, we've all been very tuned in to possibilities, in private individuals who've been interested, which have been limited, ideas of what that building could be, but we also have had concerned conversations about what that spot would be if it's not a building. And we are now, I think, at that point where we have to think about that. And so with the donation of the property, I think I'd be interested to have, if we can have a candid conversation about this. I know I told Chad, council is not a good space for these kinds of conversations. It feels very yucky to be up here on television saying things like, well, what about this and what about that and how about this and how about that? But I think we do need to have some level of dialogue about the potential for the city to have an opportunity with regards to that property. Does it have to pencil out on paper financially? No. I think the issue is there an opportunity for the city that we should be proposing? Is an RFP suitable? Does the city have any needed use, bathrooms as an example, that spot would be an opportunity for us to explore? The concept of food trucks has come up more than one time. It's a small space. I just caution anybody who hasn't walked around the perimeter that the Passy property actually wraps that property. So you're not dealing with a full, if you think of that as one building, it's really two. It's the L-shaped Passy building is kind of hugging that smaller building. And of course, demolition is, as approved by HPC, is a factor here. We got to think about that. It doesn't happen for no cost. I'm sure many of you have had, experiences with that on this council. But I just think our fear as an HPC was not only, gosh, it would be great if this could be preserved because it's such a small building, it almost seems manageable. But number two, if it goes, what will be there? We don't want a dumpster there. We don't want a weed bed there. We don't want it to be where additional snow gets dumped. I mean, it really is so prominent. If you happen to walk, which is actually kind of a prominent sort of a pedestrian pass-through, if you go from the library to the bank, that building is right there. And so whilst I don't know that we can do anything about that little building, I just ask you to envision another building there. I'd ask you to envision, if not a building there, what other potential uses? If a building, what would be the uses? If not a building, what would be the uses? The nature of investment in our commercial district. Obviously, there are other buildings in our downtown core that the city has some investment in, so this is not an outlier. But it's a different kind of space.
During SOAR with the Eagles, they have a lot of events at St. Felix Auditorium. So there's a constant stream of people
Right by that.
from the National Eagle Center to St. Felix, and they're walking right by that building.
Or any evening when people are dining on that small
True.
2-block stretch. So it's another concept that was floated in the HPC meeting, which I hadn't thought of, and I don't believe I'd heard before, was a structure but not a building. So Nancy Falcom is on the HPC and said she could envision a structure where there is, wayfinding information or amenities for the public, such as water fountains, something like that, where there's a protection of whatever amenities we choose to place there, but not an actual building itself. And I thought that was a new concept that I hadn't heard before. As far as, is there anything salvageable? The report details that some of the foundation appears to be intact. A contractor who explored beyond the report itself, which was thorough. I mean, the individuals who participated in this were in that building for days. It's a very, when they get grant-eligible reports, they don't miss anything. But what the report could do was an interior inspection of the foundation, not an exterior inspection of the foundation. So I had a contractor locally just kind of, vocalize what his concerns would be about that. And he said, very matter-of-fact said, there might be intact foundation, there might not. Nobody's going to guess for you. They're going to, exhaust that possibility when they can appropriately excavate.
Talking about salvage, there's a wooden header right on the top
Yeah.
of the building.
Okay, don't even get me started. So
Can
this
we
is where,
salvage that?
when people talk about demolishing that, I just kind of think, if we have to demolish it, the features that are relevant to that building from an architectural standpoint, if you care about that, is a pressed metal cornice. It's perfectly intact. And the HPC recommended that there be selective demolition before demolition. I think Chad said that might even be two different crews, you know, have somebody take off what is salvageable, determine where, if it's salvageable, where it can be stored, and also potentially, if a structure is rebuilt, consider, I think it's way too early to say we would require, but consider whether the city would suggest that those features be reused. So that's actually a pressed metal cornice. It's prefab. It's Victorian prefab, and that was called out in the report as one of, you know, the key feature. There is pressed tin siding that's still intact as well that could be reutilized potentially, and both of those materials those features are still available. Those kinds of architectural features are still available. So it's the kind of thing that if a person were to develop a little building that would be suitable for the district, they would be looking to purchase those or build those details. We don't see a lot of new construction in our commercial district, so we haven't seen anybody kind of go through that. But that was explicit in the HPC's discussion, was it would be appealing to retain the opportunity to utilize those features. And that is sort of, to Chad's kind of presentation to the HPC, the donation to the city affords the city control and some level of guidance with regards to what occurs on that spot. So I don't know how freewheeling people feel comfortable, you know, talking about this, or if you just feel comfortable enough with the idea of a donation and we revisit this in an ongoing fashion and talk about how it's utilized. But I just wanted to give it kind of the full attention that it deserves, because I think a lot of people out there would like to just sort of imagine that it can just be demolished tomorrow and not a problem. But it's really in the heart of our district where we have a lot of pedestrian and business activity. It's extraordinarily visible. I think for the city to just sort of allow it to be demolished, you know, even at the owner's expense with no conditions, would potentially lead to an outcome that none of us are happy about.
I don't have a problem saving what can be saved. So, you know, let's at least do that.
Right.
You know,
Seems like a no-brainer.
If we don't do something soon, there's gonna be nothing to save. So, and I've seen some discussions on, the internet out there about, bathrooms, combination chamber use and so forth. And, if that's the case, then, you could design around that, something that's appropriate to go in that area.
Right. The beauty of this report that was conducted is it's the blueprints. I mean, it tells you would no longer be pursuing a historic rehabilitation project, but you could newly construct to the tune of the, you know, the way it's drafted and described.
So, I don't know what extra cost there is to, salvaging what is historic, you know, as far as the tin and stuff, but I can't imagine it'd be too much. So, and I'm sure we got plenty of storage areas for it somewhere, so.
Yeah, did you look, is storage a concern for you? I mean,
I want to clarify a few procedural things here, just for the public,
yeah.
on how we got to where we're at today. We don't like to do these. We don't like to do, when I say these, Slate and Blum,
That's hard to say, isn't it?
Yes.
Slum and blight.
Slum and Blight.
And I'll tell you, no cities do. When we go to preservation conferences, cities at the, you know, to the size of Philadelphia don't like to do slum and blight. Yeah.
No one's a winner in it, and then the last time that we did it on the west side, what was formerly Maggie's grocery store, and the city was stuck with a very hefty bill, north of $25,000, and that just included the demolition, not including the, at the time we were working under Attorney Extran and under a retainer, so you didn't see the broke-out cost for legal, but we did recently pursue this down on Lower Main Street with an owner, and in the end, our process probably forced the owner to sell to an active rehabilitator that has done a lot of good work on that property, so to speak, and has saved it. But just to get to that stage, the city had close to $8,000 invested in it. So this ain't easy. So what would happen is we would force this cleanup of this property, which ultimately would be demolition, based on the things that Mayor Durand spoke about, as well as the private contractor that has been in there for us. So we would work with the property owner to force the demolition. We would have significant legal costs in that. Most of the time, and this isn't a dig on the current owners or anything like that, but most of the time, they don't do it willingly. So we have to consider worst-case scenario where the city would be forced to order it, the city would be forced to pay it, and then the city would be forced to assess it. When you have a piece of property like that with such a large assessment against it, it doesn't pencil out to be a economic opportunity for anybody to further develop that parcel. Therefore, it would probably go through the state court system through a tax forfeiture, and then our assessment would be thrown out. We could always put it back on, but at the end of the day, it would not move. The one we did on the west side, we ended up assessing only $5,000 of the $25,000 bill just to get that piece of property to move. So that's the kind of how this process works, or how people need to consider that when you consider the fact that the city's looking at accepting a donation and then spending money right off the bat. It isn't, at 10,000 foot, it looks interesting, but there is some logic behind the process that was used here, or that is looking to be used, so to speak. And then the biggest thing is control. There has been several, even in this economic development survey we've had, there's been comments on this, and there's been long-standing comments since before I started on facilities, restroom facilities downtown for all of the outdoor activities. So it's not this isn't a far-fetched, grab it when you can get it kind of thing. This is something that has been thought of. So that's my clarification.
Any other comments or thoughts? I mean, I've only heard what I've heard with regards to ideas. I appreciate that new ones are coming up, and I appreciate hearing that the bathroom is a sort of, restrooms are a restated need. I've heard pushback about that too. I've heard people say, well, there's beautiful bathrooms at Beach Park. There absolutely are, but I can tell you when you're walking with a small child, you can't get there. I mean, they're not within appropriate distance for that part of our commercial district. Very glad they're there when you're at Beach Park, but they're not suitable for visitors and residents who aren't already at the park. That's how I see it.
Well, I think that we should have some type of a plan of what we want to do with that property, because otherwise, if we just wait on that, it is going to become a place for dumpsters, snow, whatever, trash. And it is right on that's one of the primary walkways in the city. So I think we should have a plan for what do we want to do with that and follow through with that.
How do you think we should evaluate the impact on the public? It's a basic need. Restrooms are an obvious basic need. A path towards something like what Nancy described, which is a structure with that seems more doable to me. I don't have a sense of the appetite for council to authorize significant expenditures on something like a bathroom, even though we all seem to be aware that they're needed. I could see a path of grantsmanship toward something that's interpretive. So, that we got to think about how we weigh that with regards to our plan. And that doesn't have to happen tonight. I just would suggest that that's kind of part of, the feasibility element of it is so that we aren't still talking about it in 10 years.
Well, when we had the bookstore, we had a lot of people come into the bookstore and ask, what is there to do in this town? And so I think what we really need to have is some type of information kiosk. Now, the National Eagle Center gives out a lot of information, and it's available at the Chamber of Commerce as well. But not everybody knows where those facilities are. So if they're just walking around and there's a sign that says city information, something like that, I think that would be a big help to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you could put your brochures in there, we could have maps of the city, whatever, so that would be,
I should say
that would be good. I think.
that front space, whatever you want to call it, the space, facing Pembroke, was envisioned that way. That's why it wasn't too terribly explicit about what it would be. The possibility that there would just be an armchair and then a lot of display in there. There might be electronic display that allows for events to be, populated so that if there's no person or attendant there, there's still sort of an interactive way to address what you're saying. It was also drawn so that the public bathrooms would be accessible even if the front space were closed. So if there were an exhibit of something of some value, that there would be transparency so that police would be able to see through into that building, but also security. So it's spec'd out kind of fancy, if I may say so, the way that it was studied, because we just really wanted to investigate whether a use like that would be feasible, so, for what that's worth. The other issue that's come up is, for people to sort of have a touchdown space for remote work, whether that's somebody who needs an hour on a laptop where they have power and access to Wi-Fi, or somebody who really needs to, work remotely. We haven't pushed that too far, but I think that's another avenue where certainly building expenses are not going to be covered by grants, but I can imagine that technology expenses, as well as probably furnishings, that there would be a way to find resources with regards to something like that, because it's for economic development. That's what we have, I think, as a challenge. I asked Chad, what will the public think of when they think of something like this with an investment? He said, there really isn't one. There wouldn't be a project that he can think of. The park bathrooms, not only are they bathroom, but they're also, as I understand it, what's the word I'm looking for? Space for emergency.
Storm.
Yeah, emergency shelter for the campground. So that explains why they are such nice bathrooms. So this is just a novel, thing I think we'd have to wrap our heads around. I don't think it's similar to the Second Street properties, where that's much more space. Those are different altogether, so I wouldn't lump these together and say, the city's got to solve all those 3 parcels at once. I think this is a very unique, different opportunity.
Well, there may be some grants available too for that, so.
Right. Certainly there would be with regards to interpretive
And the Main Street Association has some
right?
things that they can help with. They have been helping with architectural design on 2 buildings
Yep.
in the downtown area, so they might be able to help with that, and Mary can maybe address that more.
Yeah. I thought of that too, the design assistance. The city could apply for that design assistance. So we need some action here. It's kind of weird not to go into the detail of the demolition. Do you want to talk about that at all, or do we?
I think we touched on it. I say we
Yeah.
move forward
Okay.
with the donation first.
So we have another related agenda item, as I'm sure you've noted. But would anyone entertain a motion to approve this donation?
I make the motion to approve the donation of that building.
Sounds good. And do we have a second, or any qualifications on that motion, or just leave it at that, move forward? Okay.
Would you accept a qualification to send a thank you to James and Mary Raymer?
Part of our process. Yep.
Protocol. All right, well, thanks for entertaining this. Like I said, this is kind of odd discussion to have in council because it's nebulous at this point, but I appreciate going with it. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, we have accepted the donation of that property and more to come. So very related, we have the demo bid for this particular property attached. As we said, the building's deemed beyond repair, and as Chad mentioned, the HPC has already approved this demolition, which was historic and not fun for that commission to do. But I'll just note that in the same meeting, it's the first, they had the first approval of a new structure in the commercial district as well. So I think that, to me, that reflects where Wabasha is at, and we are very lucky to have the historic assets that we have, and they can't all be saved, and in the name of progress, I think preservation is actually a really important element of Wabasha's progress. So this is the demolition bid, lots of detail. You might notice the asbestos removal, if present, that's where there's some possibility for the cost to shift some. So they went middle of the road. Do we have a motion to
I move
approve
to accept the
the
bid.
bid? Thank you, Tim. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Do we have any further discussion?
Is it possible to add an addendum to preserve those items that we were talking about that have been discussed.
Yeah, what do you want to do about that? You know,
We can hire a contractor to go in there, and I think that the HPC commission created a subgroup or someone that can work with that contractor to go in there,
And if they didn't, I would think that there would be a will there.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Because
right.
from our perspective, we're not gonna have that
Knowledge,
keen eye
right.
on those things, so
Well,
we
I-
could do that first, in the first phase, and
Yeah.
move right into the demolition with what's remaining.
okay, yeah, I know that the report would outline what those features are that are intact.
Okay.
What kind of time frame are we talking on this, for this thing to get destroyed?
When
I
available.
mean, I'd hate to see this waiting to pull off this so-called historical stuff, you know, that drags in, and it's gonna be through another winter, but sitting there.
No,
Won't stand through
absolutely
another
not. I
winter.
think
Yeah.
we need to set a time frame on that.
It won't,
That's
it
what
won't
I'm
make it through
saying.
another
I
winter.
think it has to be absolutely within
Soon.
2 weeks that we can get a contractor in there to remove what they can.
I forget what I was gonna say about I mean, I worry about additional rain. I mean, when I was in the building during the periods of heavy rain, Dylan Harder and I were both in there, you know, with the owner's permission, and it wasn't just taking on water, it was holding water, because it had been a period of about 6 to 8 days, and there was water dripping, so it can't make it to winter, let alone through winter.
And I think if I remember correctly, what some people have said is that is one of the oldest buildings, or not maybe the oldest building in Wabasha.
It's not
Close.
definitive, but we have no data that it isn't. And
Okay.
based on its construction type, and the fact that most of those balloon frame construction buildings were replaced with brick or burned and ultimately had a brick structure, there's lots of evidence to suggest that it very well may be, so,
Well, so I think it would be worth it to preserve some
element of it.
remnants of it.
Right, right. So we have a motion, and we have a second, and I think this is all sort of taken into consideration. We have to figure out kind of how to operationalize that.
We should probably, if we want to amend it,
So I'll amend it.
well, I think we need to we've had a second, so we need to let it either get denied, which I think we need to do.
Okay,
We need
so-
to, if it's not gonna fly, we
Yep.
need to go through that, and then we need another motion.
Sounds good. So, all those in favor? Opposed? Same sign. Aye. Motion fails. So we have this significant amendment, and we'll make a fresh motion.
So first, I'll approve the demolition bid. Secondly, we would hire a contractor to salvage, per the guidance of HPC and city staff, to preserve whatever we can within the next 2 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks. Is that fine?
But are we gonna put a price tag on that? Is that gonna be an open-ended thing to preserve stuff? We got our
I
bid
guess
for
I'm not totally
15.
sure.
Really about the only thing we should
Demo.
have is the contractor cost, but yeah, I mean, otherwise you're given an open checkbook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I don't know how much, within that is salvageable, I guess. Do you know?
My guess is the cornice only. That's what warrants being salvaged. So it's right there to be peeled off, you know,
You
like,
got a crowbar.
you get a volunteer crew and get that accomplished, I don't know.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't go near it.
Yeah, yeah.
Force of that crowbar might,
It just needs somebody probably with the equipment, and maybe it is that same contractor.
somebody that is,
With 5,000.
Heard
Yeah,
and
You
bounded.
exactly.
get it done for 5,000, I think.
Yeah,
Or
Everything
5,000 or under.
I would sure hope so.
Okay, let's do it that way, then for under $5,000.
Seems like a lot of money.
I would think it'd be less than that, yeah.
It'll be a lot less than that. Dankor might be able to do it. But it gives them the leeway.
Gives them
the
leeway.
to
Right.
Make something happen.
Yeah, I think
I-
we can have discretion there. It's not worth $5,000, I don't think, so, you know, see what they say they need to accomplish it. If it's a part of the regular process, I would think they'd have the equipment needed. All right, we have that kind of cloudy motion. See if I can restate it. To approve the bid, including a contingency of up to 5 for removal of historic features.
You want to drop that 5 That's fine by me.
Yeah, sure.
I threw that out there, man.
Yeah, I'm fine with dropping it to whatever.
How much you
Up
think
to
that
2.
stuff's worth?
You think
Well,
two-
it's probably
It's the
worth,
time
it's
that's
probably
gonna
worth
be the-
plenty, but the time, the value of the
It's gonna
contractor
be the
time.
time of the
Yeah.
contractor,
Right.
basically.
I mean, if you want to drop it to 2,000, and you think that's fine by me. Let's drop it to 2,000.
Okay. So approval of the bid with a contingency of up to $2,000 for the removal of the historic features as explicit in this report. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. The HBC appreciates this. We knew this wasn't gonna be easy for council. So, that commission is aware of where this stands. All right, and then we have, planning and zoning, Main Street presentation for 2020 financial request. And I, invite Mary Fleechek to the podium, as well as anybody else wants to speak to that.
And Chrissy, I have three board members here. I'm going to pass each
Can you
one
pull the
of...
microphone down, Mary?
these brochures. Okay.
Make sure.
Pass one of each. Go ahead and take one of each copy. I'm Mary Fleechek, the volunteer Main Street coordinator. We've been on Main Street since 2017. City has funded us 2018 to $4,000. Last year was $6,000, and this year we're asking for the same amount. Last year we did a Main Street by the numbers of our first year as an organization. This year we found a lot more funding from outside sources besides the city. We were able to get a $4,000 mini grant, so we put up some Welcome to Wabasha banners. And with that, we're working on history windows. We were able to find $4,000 additional from the community to do more adoptive planters downtown, so we're up to 23. We've secured 2,500 in memberships our first year, and we're now going to be out on a membership campaign. And then I secured a $30,000 two-year grant for Artists on Main. So those are the two publications in front of you. The Artists on Main serves 10 local artists, putting out multiple events over the next 6 weeks. There was a weeding through process, and 45 came to a workshop. 15 thought about it, 10 were awarded $1,000 each. Our organization got $5,000 to do the 10 programs, and next year we'll get $10,000. And that opportunity happened to us because we are an accredited Small Cities Main Street organization. To stay accredited, we have to put in $5,000 a year. We need to do quarterly reinvestment statistics. And we also have to go to mandatory trainings for our board, our steering committee, and myself as a director. So we passed with flying colors the first year. So we want to continue on year 3. This year we also had partnerships, and we convened with multiple organizations, a lot of the nonprofits in town. We've worked with the Chamber, RJAC, RVEG, VFW Auxiliary, Legion, Community Foundation, Wabasha County Healthy Ship offices, of course the City of Wabasha, the Public Library, Preservation Commission, Minnesota Futures, National Eagle Center, Minnesota Main Street, and it goes on and on and on, because Main Street wants to be part of the promotions of our community. We do economic development, we do design and organization and promotions. Inside your Main Street brochure, we always follow the 4-point program. It's a state and national program. It's a 40-year-old program. It's 1,700 communities across the nation. Wabasha has sent city staff, heritage preservation commissioners, and myself to national conferences over the last 5 years. And that is one of the requirements, and the community is invited to attend those conferences also, along with state and local, regional committee meetings. Our board meets monthly, our steering committee meets monthly, and we are looking at 2020 with more projects and more promotions. We're looking at history windows, some more artist on Main, and then we have $4,000 a year to spend on a city revitalization project that we can partner with the city. So I don't know what to do with it. If you have, I have reached out to Port Authority. If you have, and Tony, do you want benches? Do you want more bikes? what do you want? Because I have to fill out a deadline by December 15th to get $4,000 more from the State of Minnesota Main Street Program, RETHOS, the reinvented PAM, and ask for the funds. And because we're pay our dues, we get our money back. So it's a win-win for all of us. Do you have any questions about the program? I just would like to continue to fund it.
The big one that's so obvious is the planters, which of course is, what you're doing is you're leveraging private investment in the beautification of
Yes.
our,
We're over
city.
$15,000 of private investment.
right,
Yeah.
that's a big deal.
And all of those business owners said, we'll do it every year till infinity, until they don't own the building anymore. So they just get automatically billed twice a year to decorate for spring and Christmas. And
I know it's a significant cost to the businesses. I appreciate that they're doing that.
$500 up front.
They see the value, clearly.
and they want more. I want to get to 24, 23. So I've got a, I think Mike Smith put something in the paper about our Artist on Main this week, and we're reaching out to the public for more additional planters the following week. We have a new website. We're on social media. Craig is my treasurer. Chrissy is on our board of directors, and both of them have done marketing and promotions. Our board works tirelessly. Our board put in 500 hours this year, and then beyond that with the Artist Project. So,
I've been exploring grant opportunities, we need to establish that we're able to do these kinds of projects that we propose we should receive funding for, and always, there's a question that asks, describe the other ways your community has addressed these issues. And I think it's really important for us to establish these planned and well-executed and appropriately funded examples of how our community gets things done, because again, it just leverages the opportunity for other support. So this is a big list of items we could use.
It's a grassroots effort. I think Wabasha's always stepped forward with volunteers. We're filling a void. We're hoping to help the city do some little bit of revitalization. But I think the downtown planners and just even the banners have brought a sense of civic pride. And it's an energy, so then more people are decorating and more things are happening. And I know Septoberfest does it really great in the fall. But it was nice to see even Pussy Willows and the planters and then go into summer plantings, which went into 4 seasons of banners. And it's a trickle down. If the neighbor's painting his building, you better paint your building too. So that's kind of what happened, and now there's more greenery on the streets. So I just feel like the community members can fill that void if the city can't always do it, and it's not on your radar to do it. So
Capacity.
it is, and we have capacity too as a volunteer group, but we've reached out to other organizations and individuals and businesses.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mary?
I do. Mary, has there been any discussion on the Main Street Committee about, helping downtown with weeds and stuff like that?
We've had somebody.
A number of times I've gone down to do it already this summer, and other residents have too. You've had discussions, you said?
Yeah, somebody's come forward with us and made some suggestions. And they're fun. Next time we do our visits, we should hand out a paring knife so everybody in front of their buildings, slices their weeds. But individual businesses should maintain their property in front of them and behind, I guess. We could do a cleanup maybe every spring when there's when the company's coming, it's Earth Week, let's clean our weeds. But this year's been a wet summer, so every time you turn around, there's another weed in the cracks in the sidewalk.
Children.
Yeah, and so just maybe sending out reminders, but we don't have an email out there for constant contact yet. We're just starting a database. We are all volunteers. We don't have really equipment. I'm working off of my private computer.
To Dean's point, one of the things I heard loud and clear when we used to go to Main Street program trainings before we were a full member was that when you have a Main Street entity, it's very different to have a Main Street volunteer come down and say, hey, I noticed that you're getting a little bit of weeds here. We're going to have a spruce up, hope you'll participate. That's very different than being served a notice from the city. And there's a very different level of civic response and business response when it's like, hey, we'd love to make the community look great and we'd love for you to join us. Than, the police showing up. Which is the reality of how things are enforced.
I was driving through town the other day and there was a lady that doesn't own a business and she's out there pulling weeds and stuff. And I've seen it numerous times this summer, and it'd be nice to get a group together to just walk the area.
We certainly can do that. HBC had done a spring cleanup letter years ago.
Yep.
And then we said every spring, remember, paint your doors, fix your back, pull your weeds. And we could probably send something out with that, with the chamber or somebody to
When
just
I-
pick that day.
When I did that walk about town to invite participation before, a lot of business owners said, oh, yeah, I forget to even come in the front door once in a while to see what it looks like. You know, that's the reality of owning a business is you park on the back and scoot in and don't even notice sometimes that the weeds are overtaking the flowers. So
I would like to get that to that point where it's not so busy, but we've been really busy with the organization of it and the promotions and setting it up so we're accredited. And now we can run with design and community involvement and all of that, so.
Yeah, I'm impressed with your organizational efforts and that you also pursued a grant. I know we had a conversation about, you know, this Artists on Main, was this the year? Should you wait? And I think I told Mary to wait. She said, you know what,
No.
I'm going to do it anyway. Because when the opportunity presents itself.
You got to jump in. We're getting a lot of recognition as a community in multiple magazines with the Preservation Alliance in Minnesota because we are an Artist on Main, because the Bush Foundation funds its Springboard for the Arts. I'm on the website of Rethos, not knowing they're taking pictures. So
A lot of visibility.
there's a lot of visibility for Wabasha, and we got mentioned again in the latest Driftless magazine from Decorah, Iowa. It just came in my office today. And so Wabasha Main Street, because of the Artists on Main program, is getting recognition, which is really good for Wabasha's marketing and promotions.
Anything further?
Yeah, last year, this program was kind of sold to me as we gave you money to give you some seed money so you could become a full member in the Main Street organization. It looks like you guys are doing a great job. You've raised a lot of money, you've got a lot of grants. I'm just not sure why do we have to keep giving you money now? I mean, you're on your feet now. What would happen if we did not give you a penny this year? Would you fail?
We wouldn't fail. This program is a city and private partnership. You
Well,
can't be
that
a,
wasn't sold to me. It's not
Oh.
truly a city and private partnership.
well, the city signed a memorandum of understanding to continue that. It's when you become a Main Street. I was a Main Street program for 7 years. Wabasha City has been a Main Street 7 years prior to this level of membership. We have been paying dues for 7 years as a network community. We just upped the dues. So that's when we needed help to pay the dues because we're not a fully staffed Main Street. And they changed the criteria for you to become Main Street because you can do it with a volunteer with the small cities that we are.
To require a staff person, which just wasn't feasible, or paid
Right,
staff
and this
person.
is a partnership always with a city and an organization called Main Street, you
But
know.
when we were the network member, we're not eligible for the grant.
All of this, all the funds,
Right,
yeah.
But now that you've raised a lot of money, it seems like you should be able to stand on your own now without
It's
the
a,
city's contribution. I mean,
the city,
Still.
we need the city's endorsement.
what's our direct return on investment to the city
Oh.
of this Main Street program?
Oh.
What goes into his budget every year? What are
Oh,
we getting from
okay,
this?
the budget, you're spending almost $3,000 in dues to the state and national, and they turn around and give us $4,000 back.
What do they give to the city of Wabasha?
$4,000 grant back to do downtown revitalization efforts like the
What's that money?
banners.
Does Chad get that money?
No, we have to spend it in projects downtown, in like benches and planters and banners and beautification efforts and revitalization efforts.
Things that otherwise would. be
Market
budget.
surveys, studies that you would pay normal other professionals to do. And then the extra funds this year went towards developing a website. Part of the criteria to stay at this level of membership is to train your board, train your volunteer staff, whether it be me or
Anybody
anybody.
who wants to participate.
All of our board and all of our steering committee and our new secretary are all trained staff, and they're just going to quarterly meetings in Red Wing, Winona, Owatonna, wherever they are, just to stay accredited. And it's a partnership. I don't know how to explain it better than that. You have to have a city endorsing you.
Piece, while you maybe can't put a price tag on that, unless council is willing to go to these kinds of trainings, we don't have capacity to leverage some of our most important resources with regards to economic development. We just don't have it. The Port Authority's not, at this time, committed to that level of training, so you're developing capacity in our citizens. And to your point, you could get your money right back by, for instance, if we selected a project on this parcel that we just accepted in donation, when we say, where's the money going to come from to do that? The answer in this case would be from this $4,000 grant. that Main Street makes available to the members that are affiliated at this level. So I also think, while it's maybe not explicit, or maybe it is explicit, that the Main Street program needs to see the investment of the city at some level to believe that the program has the potential for real impact. Because if the city isn't investing, what does that say about the city's investment in itself? You know, I mean, it's a indication of that partnership being more than just good job.
Right, every city across the United States who's a Main Street community has a city and Port Authority investment to the tune of many more thousands of dollars a year. But we're not asking for that because we're a volunteer organization. It's still, and we're rural. So what we're going to look for is more additional grants, because Artists on Main will run out, but the mini grant will always be there. But as more communities in the state of Minnesota apply for membership, that mini grant pot will get smaller. So right now we're at the peak of Artists on Main funding, and we're at the peak of mini grant funding. Those larger dollars will go away as the couple years down the road, because they're looking for more Main Street communities in northern Minnesota to
But new
partner with them.
opportunities could emerge, and I'm just speculating.
And
too,
it
that
is,
the
yeah.
Bremer, was it Otto Bremer? No, Bush
Right,
Foundation.
and Blue Cross Blue Shield, AARP, challenge grants, there's grants the Port Authority has. We can always partner with them with our mini grant funds.
But with the architectural design help that two properties have utilized in the downtown area, with the planters that have been put out, with the Artists on Main Street, with the Christmas tree lighting, there's a number of things. That's what your $6,000 went for, things like that. So what you've got is an investment in your downtown area. And we have a historic downtown district. And I think, you know, this is the kind of thing that where you don't get the money back into the city coffers, but you get the money spent in the city.
Within the district, it's like
within the
required,
district.
yeah.
And you've got buy-in. 24 planters are out there then from local businesses, and they spent $400 for those planters, and they spend $200 a year to maintain those planters. So that's $600 the first year, and then $200 a year after.
That's a big investment.
23 businesses thought was worthwhile. There wasn't any question on it. In fact, we have to order more planters
Yeah.
because we have so many people that want to do this. And if you walk downtown, I'm not a plant guy or a flower guy, but I have to admit, they look pretty nice when they're sitting out there. You got some greenery with all of the concrete and asphalt.
Yeah.
So
And
I think it's a good thing. It's an investment in the city and in the city's downtown in their historic district.
In a lot of cities, those would be, you know, bollard-like planters that are paid for with city dollars, you know, maintained by city employees.
We weren't asking for that at all.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that initial investment, the first year was over 10,000, now we're up to 15,000 in investments in that. And those are just from friends and neighbors who are doing business downtown, who write checks every day to donations. And they said, I would rather you think about it, fill it, and I'll just write you a check. And that was a wonderful response, so we're just gonna keep adding to it, as long as they still want the planters.
Anything further? We don't have an action tonight, but I really appreciate this. I told Mary I'd really like this conversation. I think it should be expected that there's city investment in these kind of initiatives, but I also think it should be expected that the entities who request money ask each year. It's good for us to be updated, just like the departments update us, and that's the sort of the approach I'd take with the chamber as well, which is why we have Chrissy here, so.
I'd like to see direction.
Do you?
Including or not including. I didn't put that in.
Oh,
there,
okay, you
since
do
it
want some
could go
action,
both
okay.
ways.
So you want some direction about whether it is included in the planning
Budget or not.
budget?
Yep.
Okay. So do we have a motion to include is it 6, Mary?
6 is what we were looking for again this year.
Sustain $6,000 funding in the planning and zoning budget for the 2020 financial request.
I'll make that motion to.
I'll second it.
We have a motion from Friedmeier, a second from Moyer. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it
for
very much.
your continued support, I really appreciate it, and so does our steering committee. Thank you.
You want action on chamber too?
Yeah.
Chrissy, welcome. Same kind of deal. As I said, obviously the city is very pleased to work with the chamber, but I just think when we go through these financial discussions every year, we find ourselves, you know, looking at each line of the department budgets. We want to look at the ones that we expend elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, those are-
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me here tonight, and also thank you for your support. The past several years, it's been huge in allowing us to take on various marketing projects, and we couldn't do without you. Tourism is a big economic driver for Wabasha. It has a huge impact. In a study done in 2017 by Explore Minnesota Tourism, there was $27 million in the tourism industry spent in Wabasha County. So that's quite a bit of money coming in. That's people staying at our hotels, eating at our restaurants, going to our gas stations, buying food, all of that. So it really trickles down and helps everybody. I do have a few extra of these cereal boxes from Explore Minnesota that has more information on the different metrics that they use to study the impact of tourism. If anyone is interested, I can pass those out later. So what I gave you is a copy of our travel guide and some information on the overall big marketing projects that we do every year. And of course, the biggest one is the travel guide, and that's the one that your support has helped us do every year. And we print 50,000 of these travel guides and distribute them across Minnesota and mail them out globally as well. So we get quite a broad reach with that, and they are huge in promoting Wabasha as a place to visit. A lot of information on the businesses, things to do, places to stay, all of that. And that alone costs $25,000. So it is a big part of our budget to create that, but the payoff is huge. And then I have listed the other marketing projects we do as well. And these are all done just to promote Wabasha Kellogg as a place for people to visit. So that includes advertising with Wisconsin Public Radio, internet direct marketing, including Google AdWords and social media, paid advertising, things like that. Our email marketing campaigns are huge, and that goes out not just to local people, but again, people across the state or globally, whoever we have the addresses for who has requested information. And then, of course, our website as well is a big tool for us and for the city in general for promoting what we have here, information for visitors and residents alike. Are there any questions about the different marketing projects?
Chrissy, can you kind of clarify how does ad revenue factor into the costs and
Sure.
how this publication works?
Sure. The ad revenue we get from the travel guide is about $18,000, and we use that more toward the other marketing projects we do. So the funding we get from the city council allows us to put together the guide in general, and then the revenue we make from that allows us to do the other important marketing projects like the radio advertising and our website and things like that.
What's the Chamber of Commerce's annual budget?
Sure. Our annual marketing budget is about,
Your whole budget?
right, of course. Our marketing budget is about $80,000, and then, so that's the CVB part of it, because we're split with the Convention Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber of Commerce budget, I believe, is around $180,000. I believe that's what I looked at earlier today. And of course, there's marketing on that side of things too for just our events and the chamber in general. But the marketing projects I have in front of you are just for the city as a whole, if that makes sense.
So what exactly do we get for $15,000?
Of course. The $15,000 that helps us produce the travel guide, which helps attract people to come to Wabasha. And when they come to Wabasha, they're spending money here, which helps our businesses, and it helps the local economy. And of course, there's tax dollars that come in from that as well. Sales tax, lodging tax, that kind of thing.
How much does Kellogg contribute to this?
Kellogg contributes as a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and they contribute only $750. However, the size difference, of course, makes a big difference.
I'll say this also was used for my family as a resident recruitment tool because there wasn't anything else, and it's a pretty good one with regards to, lifestyle amenities.
We try and make it as a thing that is great for our visitors, but our residents can use it too if they're looking for, they don't know what to do for dinner. They can look in the travel guide, or if they need a map, if they're new to the area. And then there are directory listings as well for different services like realtors and dentists, that kind of thing.
I know I've had this discussion with Chad about the usefulness of these travel guides, and it's very nice. I like it. But I've also had discussion with the local restaurateur, and he says most of them end up in the trash at his establishment. So, I mean, how useful are they really? I mean, that's always a question, I guess, but it was a nice guide.
It's kind of, it is nebulous. But they are, you see them all across the state. I mean, and that's nice. It's that branding kind of concept.
I mean, to be fair, they're meant to be disposable. It's an annual guide,
Right.
so that, they're not something.
Yeah, my hope is
archive.
that
Yeah.
when they throw them away, it's because they got the
They're done.
information they needed.
Wasn't there some talk, and forgive me, how interconnected is this guide with the website?
Sure. There is a digital copy of the guide on our website, and then the directory listings are the same as well, a little bit more in depth. You don't put a plumber in your travel guide for visitors. They hopefully don't need that while they're here. And our website is also continually updated, so if we were to get a new member halfway through the year, we can update the website, but we can't go ahead and reprint 50,000 copies of the travel guide.
That was Jeff and my discussion last year was, he uses his phone and I'm an old print guy. In fact, it was pretty recent to the time that we actually went out west and we had a whole pile of them in the truck by the time it was over.
What percentage of the local businesses are members of the Chamber of Commerce?
I don't know the percentage, but I can tell you we have just over 100 members, and that's from all different industries in Wabasha.
Is that pretty steady?
It is. We have I believe it was a 96% retention rate so far this year, and growing, of course.
Thanks. I get these questions all the time as if I'm the chamber director. People clearly need to understand the difference between the city council and the chamber, but I think we all get sort of chamber questions. This is very informative. Do we have any further questions for Chrissy? So same action is desired. Do we have a motion to include the request, which I believe is 15,000 in the budget we looked at?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Sulla. Do we have a second?
Second.
Look at the smiles. You're both so smiley. Very collaboration. We have a motion, we have a motion from Councilmember Sulla. We have a second from Councilmember Falcom. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Chrissy.
Thank you
Appreciate
again for
time.
your
Sorry, it's
support.
kind of a long meeting, but
That's
hope you
okay.
learned a lot.
Thank you.
We'll call you about chambers future and what this,
And thank you,
Building looks like-
Chrissy. Chrissy has tendered her resignation from the chamber,
we'll miss you.
and we'll be moving on.
Withdraw that motion.
Thank you for your efforts
Looking
here
for
over the
capable
years.
leadership to take over what you've done. Thank you very much. All right, now I've kind of lost my place here because I got all this stuff in front of me.
So Item
I think we're back to a new item, right?
10.6.
Oh, 6, excuse me.
10.6 would be the approval of the finance director, clerk, and
Thank
deputy
you.
clerk job descriptions as
Addition.
handed out this evening. And then, so let me just give a little bit of background on that. As we've been planning over the last several months for Sue Schumann's ultimate retirement, we brainstormed different ideas and researched other communities and came up with a different staffing structure that pulls, a lot of the finance functions have been spread based on people's strengths and who has time to do the work, and we've looked to centralize that within a finance director, obviously keeping segregation of duties on the top of the list between the different job descriptions that we prepared, but the ultimate decision, or not decision, but recommendation from the Personnel Committee is to move forward with a finance director position, which we would be looking to immediately post, and that person would begin immediately working with Sue on transition activities for her upcoming retirement. And then we are also looking to backfill the position of deputy city clerk, which is open right now, with some slightly different duties as per the job description today. So what in essence, we're taking a lot of the finance functions out of the clerk and deputy city clerk position and moving them to the finance director position and allowing the clerk and deputy city clerk to work on ordinances, licenses, dealing with the public, those types of things. Obviously keeping in mind that we need to have segregation to an extent, which is where the deputy city clerk position would come in, so.
Very good.
So the first item in 10.6 is the approval of those 3 job descriptions as presented, with the manually noted adjustment from the council workshop.
Do we have a motion to approve those job descriptions?
Also move.
We have a-
Second.
we have a second. We have a motion from Tim. We have a second from Jeff. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
The second item in 10.6 is to move immediately to post for those positions, the finance director and the deputy city clerk position, with a posted until filled date on those job postings.
Okay, so I'll call it 10.6B. Do we have a motion to approve posting those jobs until?
I'll
filled?
move.
We have a
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Tim again and a second from Jeff. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, now I think 10.7 became approval of the minutes?
Nope.
Oh, 10.7 is approval.
10.7 became the approval to promote Wendy Bush to the
Thank you.
position
I
of
can't even
city
read my
clerk
own
effective
writing.
immediately.
I told you I didn't have room for all your changes, Craig. So we have a 10.7, and Chad will give us context there.
With this change, we've got people, really filling the need right now for items that we have here coming across our desk at City Hall, and my computer just died. So anyway, I'll go from memory. One of those things that Wendy has immediately begun working on is filling the clerk role within the city, as well as wearing many other hats. So the clerk job description in summary is basically for 40% planning time, which is what Wendy currently does already, and then some 60% time freed up for administration. I will note that position right now, we are looking at an exempt position of 32 hours, and I will note also on the finance director and the deputy city clerk that the finance director is an exempt position at 36 hours, and the deputy city clerk is a non-exempt position at 36 hours. So the clerk position, like I said, is an exempt position at 32 hours, split as such between planning and administrative work. We have the new code that we had our first reading on last month. That's going to be needing a lot of, what we did is we got that legally up to date. We have, like I said last month, a lot of details to sort through on that, so we're not having an administrative burden to process simple items that occur within the city. So that will be a lot of what the city clerk does, deals with licenses, permits, and those types of things. So we are looking to move Wendy into that position effective immediately effective immediately, which would be tomorrow.
I'll make that motion.
Very good. We have a motion to approve the promotion of Wendy Bush. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion from John. We have a second from Craig. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Wendy, for everything you already do and everything you're about to now be responsible for. Fantastic. Now we've got a reorganized consent agenda item. So 10.8, we'll say, is the minutes. Craig, you had a correction?
Yeah, just a correction. On the first reading of the city code, the vote was recorded or listed here as 6-0 adopted unanimously, and it was 5-1. I voted no on that.
Okay. Any further changes or corrections, I should say? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as corrected?
I'll move.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Tim and a second from Dean. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Agenda's approved. So 10.9 is the, depends on which order you took them off. The consent will go in the order they appear. Set a public hearing for the Fitzgerald plat, which was in the consent agenda 8.4.
So, Dugan Avenue, I used to live in River Drive, so I used to look at Dugan Avenue, and Dugan Avenue comes up from the river and then up to River Drive, and then the street, this physical street terminates, but the platted street continues. Now, the drawing that Christie has furnished shows that it's cut off at a point. My understanding was that Dugan went from River Drive to County Road 30 or Hiawatha Avenue. And if it does, and I think it does, I looked at an old plat we had out here, and it showed it did except for one small corner, and that might be where this drawing shows. In that regard, it's a through straight, and it's an avenue that could be utilized in the future, and that came up when the Corps was trying to develop the property, the Fitzgerald property down below River Drive. And so if they did, and trucks were moving, they would need a way out. So that's an example of what, in the future, you might be able to utilize the platted Dugan Street, the undeveloped platted Dugan Street. It's a connector. It's a connector between County Road 30 and County Road and River Drive. It cuts off approximately 2/10 of a mile to go down to Angelique and turn around. But if we were to have trucking, or for whatever reason in the future, I don't know, it might be worthwhile to have that street preserved. And I just think it's, right now, the owners have been farming on this street, this unplatted street, or this undeveloped street. So it's really no different from what's been going on before. The thing I'm bringing up is I think we should preserve Dugan Street in the unplatted version as a through street as a connector street.
So our action tonight is to set the public hearing. Are you good with that?
Yeah, I'm good
Action?
with that.
Okay.
If that's all we're doing, we're setting the public hearing, but I wanted to discuss one of the concerns. There didn't seem to be a point, I don't know when to
That
bring
wasn't
it up, but
clarified
I'm
in the-
bringing it up now.
Okay. All right, so we'll address that in the public hearing if we have a motion to approve that public hearing date of Tuesday, October 1st, 2019.
I move.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Oh, Dean beat you, John, sorry. So we have a motion from Waller and a second from Councilmember Moyer. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, and then I think the last item is
Contract with
the contract with the county. So this is a maintenance
Oh.
agreement between Wabasha County and the city of Wabasha for maintain roads as per the agreement.
In my previous life, I was a county engineer, and I did send these things around to the various cities. But I'm looking at the list of streets, the maintenance agreement that the county had drafted up. And it calls, on the top line, it calls for CASA 58, County State Aid Highway 58, 2nd Street, Hiawatha Drive to Pembroke. The snow and ice removal method would be plowing. And there is one block from Bailey to Pembroke that is not plowed. It is plowed and hauled. And the reason I bring that up is when they plow, the county's reimbursing us at a rate of $1,875 a mile. And when they haul and plow, they reimburse us at a rate of $4,688 a mile. So that one block in there, where the block that the VFW is on, that difference would be, if they just plowed it, it'd be $206 for that block. And this is an estimate, because I don't know the exact length of the block. And if they plowed and hauled, that would be $516. So it's $300. But I thought I'd bring it up. That if we asked the county to correct their maintenance agreement, it would mean another $300.
It's the block right in front of the VF.
And which,
So between Bailey and Pembroke on 2nd Street.
Yeah,
so it's CASA, yeah, so it's 58.
it's still 58,
Yeah.
but they're paying us at the plowing rate. And they
And for the
do,
one block of,
I know that because my bedroom is right out the window.
Because you can see them doing it.
It's there.
So
I
this
know
has
it's there.
nothing to do with you being the county engineer. You just see it happening. You've got,
But if I'm gonna get woke up in
sure
the
they'll-
morning,
I'm sure they'll
we should
correct
get
it.
paid
yeah,
for it.
okay. So do we have, can we just make a motion
Yep,
to
to approve it with
approve
that
this with that
modification.
correction?
Yep.
Do we have a motion to,
I'll make
Approve
that
this.
motion with the correction.
as corrected? And do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Friedmeier, second by Walrick. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign.
donations.
Okay,
It's
thank
the
you.
top item.
And
Yep.
we have the resolution of the donations, which I usually try to give somebody warning if I'm going to ask them to read it, and it's a pleasure to read it, so I'll do it myself. The city's been offered donations to the library, $20 in memory of Dean Kuklinski by Dave Kennebeck, $100 by Dallas and Joanne Franzen, $830 by the Wabasha Area Community Resource Center, the Common Closet, for the Hotspot program at the library, which you may have seen publicized, $700 for the bike share program by the Wabasha Bicycle Club, $500 for backhoe and labor donation from Hardert Septic Service, Jerry Hardert, for the swimming pool splash pad. Do we have a motion to approve the donations?
I'll move.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Falcom, second from Sulla. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Those are very generous donations. Do we have a motion to, or do we have any other, do everybody get their financials? Any other announcements? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Walrick and Friedmeier. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
So what's going on with the Eagle Center plans? Aren't we supposed to have a get together with the
Horizontal